Hey guys, it's Julie Malillo. I'm a life coach here in Manhattan. My website is yourdreamslifecoach.com. So, how many narcissists are there? Just a reminder, I don't deal with narcissists in my coaching. This is just a personal interest because it's fascinating and I've studied it for a really, really long time. I don't even know, 20 years probably. Um, so, how many narcissists are there? My personal opinion is there are a ton of narcissists worldwide. This is not what the experts will say. They'll say something like, oh, it's 1%, it's 5%. In my opinion, if I had to guess how many narcissists there are, I would estimate over 80% of people are narcissists. It could be as high as 90%, 95%, even 98% is possible. I know that sounds crazy, but the reality is narcissism is an epidemic and we don't really test. We don't have like a census for how many narcissists there are, and it's a misconception that we do. No one is going door to door saying, hey, can I scan your brain? Can I see if your empathy center is working? No one's doing that. So the reality is lots of people, um, in my opinion, lots of people are narcissists and that's being ignored. So, a couple interesting things I've come across recently. Number one, I saw a very interesting TED talk about an academic study that was done. I think it was academic, it was some type of study, and it sounded like a very well done study, and it was testing how many people had self awareness. And they found that only about 5% of people do. Well, narcissists don't have self awareness. So, if their study found only 5% of people have self awareness, what does that mean? That means 95% of people have something that's preventing them from having self awareness, and we know that narcissism prevents people from having self awareness. Now, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be something else involved. There could be another disorder in there, right? Like there could be, I don't know. Sociopaths, in my opinion, are pretty self aware. Like they do live in reality, they choose to do terrible things, but they're pretty like aware of what they're doing and why. So I wouldn't personally, and again guys, this is just my own views on this stuff. This isn't what psychologists agree with. This is the way that I see it based on all the narcissists and sociopaths I've met in my life, which has been a lot. Um, anyway, my theory is that like probably 80 to 95% of people are narcissists, and this study lined up with that because they found only 5% of people had self awareness. They also listed a bunch of other traits of those 5%. Those 5% of people that were self aware had a lot of other traits that, in my opinion, are emotionally healthy traits. They had traits of being securely attached, attachment style wise. And that all goes together. If you have a functioning brain with the empathy center working, you're going to be self aware, you're going to have empathy, you're going to have a lot of ability to problem solve, to see when you yourself are making mistakes, and to be aware of reality, to see your strengths but also your weaknesses, to not distort, to not write narratives that fill in the blanks, to not be grandiose, and to live in a kind of imaginary reality, which is what most people are doing these days. So that was one thing that I thought was super interesting. This was not the point of the TED Talk. They weren't talking about narcissism. They were just talking about people who have self-awareness. Now, something else that was very interesting is the speaker in this TED Talk said that people that are self-aware use the word what, and not self-aware people use the word why. So this is how I interpreted that. To me, that sounds like a narcissist who says, why is everyone always so mean to me? Why is everyone always out to get me? Why does everyone hate me all the time? Whereas the 5% non-narcissist, emotionally secure, securely attached, emotionally stable person is going to say, what do I need to do to fix this problem? What do I need to change to make this work? What is causing this? what's the main factor that's causing this to play out this way? Which is the reason that people that are self-aware are such good problem solvers. They're not saying, why is everyone always giving me a hard time? Now, this is the thing, though, about this study, is that in my opinion, those words are actually pretty interchangeable. Even though they did find that the 5% use the word what way more often than the word why, you can kind of make them mean the same thing. Let me give you an example. A narcissist could say, what about me do you hate so much that you're always making me out to be the bad guy? See how I used a different word, but it has the same meaning? I'm the victim, you're the bad guy, right? And the healthy person could say, instead of saying what, they could say why. They could use why in a healthy way and say, why is our product not selling with customers? And they could then problem solve there, okay? So you see how the word alone, in my opinion, is not quite so important. But this is a very interesting example. The woman who gave this TED Talk was a very great talk, by the way. And I'm not saying that she's a narcissist, because obviously I can't scan her brain and I don't know. But the example she used is an example that, in my opinion, a narcissist would use, whether she is one or not. Maybe she's just been around narcissists a lot. I don't know. But it was a very good example of how a narcissist thinks. So she said that she had written a book. It got some bad reviews. She spiraled downwards, which is something that happens to narcissists. Happens, people, normal people get upset by bad news too, but to really spiral downwards and lose your grip kind of a thing, to feel like you're just being sucked into a pit of despair, is much more of a narcissist thing. Again, I'm not saying she's a narcissist, I don't know, but this was a good example of how narcissists think, okay? So she said she got the bad book review and she immediately went into why. The non-self-aware that I would call narcissist, but she's calling non-self-aware. Why is this, I don't remember the question she asked. It was something kind of victim-y though. It was why are these people being so mean to me? Why are they giving me such bad reviews for no reason? That kind of victim feeling, these people are mean. Why are they being so mean to me? And she said, oh, but I did this study. I should choose the more self-aware word and use the word what. So the question she chose with the word what was, what did they like about my book? What did they like? Let me obscure reality. Let me ignore reality. Let me not be self-aware. So even though she used the word what, she did it in such a way that she may as well have said why. Okay, so it's not so much the word, it's how you use the word. So she used the word what. Now, a secure, healthy, self-aware person would have said, what did people not like about my book? That's living in reality. What did they not like? Let me read the reviews and actually see what these people said. I want to understand where they're coming from. I have empathy for the fact that they don't have to like it because they might have different views and opinions and preferences, but I want to know what did they not like about it so that I can learn from that. And I can learn as a self-aware person, next time I write a book, did they not like the way I structured it? Was it confusing? Would they prefer it being a different, was it the way I wrote it? Did I leave out some stuff that would have helped them understand? A person that's self-aware wants to problem solve. Healthy people want to problem solve. Narcissists don't. Narcissists want to live in a fantasy land. They construct a fantasy land to protect their ego. Now, they're not doing it on purpose. It's just how they are. It's how their brain is. And they really can't change how their brain is working, just like a self-aware person can't force themselves to think like a narcissist because they don't have that kind of brain, right? So it's a brain difference. So anyway, I just thought it was very interesting that her example of using a what question was, well, what do they like about the book? Let me just focus on the positive and ignore the negative that hurts my ego. This is something narcissists do a lot. They will just ignore the stuff that could really help them improve. So that's why it's a disorder, because it doesn't work, right? So that's why narcissists will just have the same problem again and again and again. For example, if a narcissist says something insulting to someone, and that person says, gosh, that was really insulting, instead of saying what was insulting about it, or how could I improve this next time and problem solving, the narcissist will say, how dare you say something so rude to me like that? Don't you care about my feelings? Well, I think that was rude of you to say that to me. You should care more about how I feel. And, well, why are people always so mean to me? This is terrible. What can I do to avoid these horribly mean people that just keep popping out of nowhere? That's how narcissists will see it, and that's a reason that they'll have the same problems. Now, sometimes they can improve, especially if someone has been really direct and been like, that was rude because you used this certain word, and they can memorize a rule. So narcissists are able to memorize different rules, and some of them, especially the smarter ones, or the ones who have had someone be very blunt with them and sort of basically train them, can learn a rule like that. Like, some of them will memorize something like, oh, I'll never talk about religion, or I'll never talk about politics because someone told me once, oh, that's rude to bring that up. And then, okay, they'll change that. But most of the time, the mistakes that they make, they just continue to make them because they're blaming other people. They're not self-aware. They're not able to take that responsibility and problem solve and say, how can I do this differently? Or what can I do differently next time to not have this come up? So the most interesting thing about this research, though, in my opinion, was that it was only 5% of people who had the ability to be self-aware, which to me, my conclusion is that only 5% of people are not narcissists, at least in how they studied this. Now, of course, it's hard to tell sometimes the real number of the population. Like, they have those, like the census or whatever, they go around to, they don't go to every single house. They go to like a few houses in each area, and from there, they draw a conclusion that most likely this many people of these demographics are there, but they don't literally go to every single house. So I don't know how exactly she studied that in her research, but it matches up with what I had been thinking, which was that somewhere over 80% of people are narcissists, and I would bet that that varies a bit by like city and part of the country and things like that. I don't know exactly how many. I've only lived in 2 states. I've lived in Arizona and New York, and yes, I have seen a huge number of narcissists in both of those states, though I have only lived in New York City. I haven't lived in New York State, so I can't say anything about New York State. And in Arizona, I lived in Tucson and Phoenix, and I saw huge numbers, so I don't think it's just a big city thing, because Tucson is not a big city, and Tucson is a very laid back, kind of not materialistic, not an image conscious kind of place, and it still has a huge amount of narcissists. So I thought that was very interesting. Now, another thing to think about is the fact that narcissists usually don't go into therapists, so most of them never get diagnosed because they think they're perfect. They think someone else is always the problem. This is their blueprint of thinking. Something went wrong, it's someone else's fault. I'm the victim in this. No matter what happens, that's what it's going to come down to. And they can temporarily kind of fake it and like pretend, oh yeah, no, I played a part in this. They can do that kind of thing a little bit if they feel like they're on really, really thin ice and they might get fired or they might get dumped. They'll like play that game a little bit, but they will often say things like, oh, I'm sorry that you have a problem with that. I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm sorry that you didn't understand how perfectly I was actually acting. Like, they'll say this, it's not an apology. It's actually blaming the other person and continue to play the victim. Like, I'm perfect, you're the problem. So because of that, why would they go to therapy when obviously you were the problem, not me? That's how they see it. And when they do go to therapy, that doesn't mean that they're going to be diagnosed. The therapist might be fooled with all of their manipulations and tricks and the way that they play the victim. The therapist might really think, oh my gosh, they must be the victim because that's the narrative they're telling me, right? They're not going to get a balanced view of what really happened from like all the people involved, right? And when they do go in for like couples or marriage counseling, their goal is going to be to win. The narcissist's goal is always to win. So they're going to focus on coming across as like the victim, poor me, they're terrible. And therapists are human, you know, they're not necessarily going to understand unless they're an expert on narcissism, which not all therapists are. Not all therapists even know what a narcissist is. There are therapists who don't know what a narcissist is, as hard as that is to believe. It's, you know, I've met quite a few therapists in my day, and, you know, I mingle, I talk to a lot of people, and I have met at least 3 who have told me they don't really know what a narcissist is. And some of those people I do think were narcissists themselves. So that's a way to sort of deny that it exists in yourself, is to say like, oh, I don't really know anything about that. Because they don't want to see those traits in themselves. So anyway, that's another reason that they really don't know how many are out there. When they say it's 2%, I mean, how would they really know? Because they haven't scanned enough people's brains in the population. They haven't done a census or anything like that. The narcissists aren't going to admit it. The therapist might not necessarily know if this person is a narcissist, and the narcissist is going to try to hide it as well. So you have a lot of things going on there, plus the fact that even getting them to go in is going to be like pulling teeth, because they don't think there's anything wrong with them. And not all therapists diagnose on top of it, right? A lot of therapists don't, especially narcissists, because they know that person's not going to come back. They're going to go into their narcissistic rage, and they're going to just say, no, I'm perfect. You're a terrible therapist. How dare you be so mean? How dare you try to like hurt my self-esteem when I'm already going through so much? Like, that's probably how most narcissists would react, and they know it. Some of the time they know it, and some of the time they know it's a narcissist and they don't want to tell them because they're going to lose that business. Or they think, well, it's not going to help for them to know that they're a narcissist. So either way, they're not getting diagnosed, and it's not going to be part of that percentage. So that's a huge disparity when they say it's like 5%, 1%, 10%, depending on where you look. And in my opinion, it's over 80, 90%. It's a funhouse mirror, and that's why they don't have self-awareness, because how much self-awareness do you have when you look at yourself in a funhouse mirror, right? Like your head's over here, your stomach's over here, your foot is here. Like, it just doesn't make sense, right? So if you had to draw a picture of yourself looking at yourself in a funhouse mirror, it would probably look nothing like you, and that's a narcissist. They don't have self-awareness because they literally can't see it. Their brain can't process it. It can't put the pieces together. So a narcissist would see themselves as extremely likable, even if they've been dumped 50 times, even if every friend they've ever had has ended the relationship. They would still see themselves as, oh, I'm super likable. I'm super easy to be around. Everyone likes me. In fact, I'm the best person in the world to be around. That's how a narcissist would draw a conclusion, even though all the data is pointing towards not that. Because think of the example that woman gave. Instead of looking at the negative book reviews and saying, okay, there's some people who don't like my book. Maybe it's a lot of people. You know, how many people is it? Is it half of them? Is it 3/4 of them? Is it only 5 of them? Right? Instead of looking at that, she says, well, let me just shield my eyes and look only at the good reviews. I'm just going to reread those 3 good reviews, even if 97% of the other reviews were all bad. And then she's going to convince herself by writing a narrative, my book is good. These 3 people liked it. It's good. It's perfect. Everyone else was just mean. I can't take that into consideration when they're just mean. So they have no right to an opinion. They're just wrong. That's a funhouse mirror way to see it, right? Someone who has self-awareness will say, okay, this number of people liked it, this number of people didn't. I asked myself, what didn't they like about it? I read the bad reviews and I got a pretty good idea that a lot of people said they didn't like this, that, and the other thing. And so I have to really think about if I want to change those things, or if that's just kind of, well, that's just how I write and I don't want to change it. But I'm going to make a decision based on reality. That's what self-awareness is. Narcissism's the funhouse mirror of, oh no, I'm the best writer in the world. Everyone loves my writing, because they've tossed out all the other evidence, or made the other evidence irrelevant, because those are just meanies. Those are just mean, terrible people, and I'm not going to listen to what they say. They're just haters. Haters gonna hate. That's such a narc phrase. It's like, haters gonna hate pretty much sums this up, because that way, no matter what they say or do, you're gonna throw it out. So then the funhouse mirror conclusion is that everyone loves my book. I'm just the best in the world, and I'm going to ignore reality. So that's a good example of how narcs do it. Again, I don't know if there could be other people that aren't self-aware that aren't narcissists. I personally don't know who those people would be, because all the disorders that I know of, like even borderlines, have some self-awareness. A lot of them can realize what they're doing. They can't stop it. And some narcissists can as well, but again, kind of the key is they can't stop themselves, because that's how their brain works. It's like their eye is seeing a broken funhouse mirror as a representation of reality. They can't see the real reality because their brain just keeps distorting it, no matter what they do. So some of them do know that about themselves, but they just aren't able to change it, which doesn't really help, because how well can you problem solve when you're looking at a broken funhouse mirror to get your information from, right? So that's just a couple things I thought were interesting, and my conclusion still is there are a lot of narcissists. It's most of the population, and I don't know the numbers for worldwide, but I've talked to a lot of people online from all kinds of Spanish-speaking countries, and so much of the world speaks Spanish, so that's a lot of countries. That's a large percentage of the world right there, is just all the Spanish-speaking countries, right? And I've talked to a lot of narcissists in Spanish from all these different countries. So I definitely don't think it's just an American thing. I've also met tons and tons of immigrants to the US from all different countries, from China, from just Europe. I mean, lots and lots of different countries, and there have been tons of narcissists as well. So, I mean, you could say, oh, maybe more of their narcissists want to go to the US or whatever, and that's possible. But I suspect that it's probably the entire world. There might be pockets of the world that have fewer, because I personally don't think it's culture at all. If it was culture, it would be everybody. No one would be immune to it. If it was just caused by culture, if it was caused by how you're raised, it would be declining, because we're having fewer kids. We're having fewer kids than we used to, so it would be declining if it was parenting. And all parents of narcissists all children of narcissists don't become narcissists, and some become sociopaths. That doesn't make any sense, right? So I personally believe that it is physical problems in the brain. I believe it's either toxins, heavy metals, possibly infections in the brain. That's my personal view. And since there's such a link with mental illness and brain inflammation, it kind of makes sense that, if the empathy center of the brain is destroyed or not working or partially working, kind of might seem like the brain has some damage in that area. Duh, is that not obvious? Okay. So my personal theory, which does not align with academia or what psychologists will tell you, is that it's a physical problem in the brain. And I also believe that because I have seen a lot of narcissists really want to improve. And again, this isn't in my coaching. This is just people I've met. I talk to lots of people. I've just had a lot of friends, and I'm an extrovert. I like talking to people. So, and I like talking to people in depth, right? So even though I wasn't coaching them, lots of narcissists wanted to improve and couldn't, and really did try to and couldn't. And I just saw it to the point that I could see they weren't pretending. It wasn't like they wanted to be that way. They really didn't want to be that way, and they really couldn't change it, which to me, yeah, it seemed as physical as a broken leg. And I didn't believe that for a long time. For a long time, I just thought, oh, they just don't want to change. They have to try harder. And I think that's the common thought. And I've learned that's not true. You know, if your brain doesn't work right, you can really, really want your brain to work right. That's not going to make your brain work right. And especially since we know the empathy center doesn't work from brain scans, I mean, why would we expect it to just start working on its own? I do think it's something physical that's preventing that brain center from working. And I do think that if we were able to get the toxins out of the brain, get any infections out of the brain, you know, reduce the brain swelling, there's a possibility that part of the brain maybe could even start to regrow, because we have neuroplasticity, which means that the brain can, you know, regrow and heal, whereas we used to think it couldn't. So, I mean, who knows? I think there's a lot of potential, but as it is now, we don't have any treatment for them, which kind of makes sense that they don't want to go to therapy, even if they do know they're a narcissist. Why would you want to go to therapy when it's not shown to work, right? So, anyway, yes, narcissists are super annoying. They're super hurtful, or they can be at least. And I mean, yeah, it's just they can be really obnoxious and really destructive. However, if you have empathy and you have self-awareness, you have to kind of step back and be like, their brain is messed up, you know? It's not going to help to just be mad at them and hate them. We know, I think that, again, we should like focus on problem solving, and I hope that researchers look into it and see if they can fix it. But the problem is, like, if 95% of the population is narcissists, how many researchers are going to be able to get their head around it enough to see reality enough to then problem solve? Because they often will see the narc traits and say some kind of thing that makes them feel better or makes them feel like, oh, I don't have that. I don't have to worry about that. Or they'll say either everyone's a narcissist or no one's a narcissist, or how dare you bring up the topic of narcissism? You're mean. You're a mean person. You don't know what you're talking about. They'll do something like that to create distance between them and that scary idea that, oh no, that might be me. I might be a narcissist. That's too hard to think about. So let's get away from that self-awareness and run towards the false narrative of whether, oh, it's just Facebook. Facebook made they made all the narcissists. It's not my fault. Facebook made me like this. Facebook fried the empathy center of my brain. How exactly would that work, guys? How is a social media site going to fry the empathy center of your brain permanently? That doesn't make sense. To me, that's like blaming video games when someone's a sociopath and they're a violent murderer, or they're like a serial killer, and you're going to blame their video game. Or you're going to blame the fact that they ate cereal. Oh, well, they're a serial killer because they ate cereal. It only makes sense. You know, it doesn't make sense. I mean, that was like a dumb joke. But really, like, a video game, if you have Mr. Rogers play a video game, he's not going to go out and shoot somebody. Anyone with empathy is not going to do that. But you take someone who is a sociopath, whether they play a video game or not, you could make the sociopath watch Mr. Rogers 24/7. It wouldn't matter. He wouldn't, you know, Mr. Rogers wouldn't shoot anyone, and the sociopath would in the right situation. Okay, so I'm just saying that it's really not about the culture. A culture doesn't fry a part of someone's brain, especially not permanently. So that's just some of my ideas about narcissism from this TED Talk that I watched that was interesting, and just continuing to, you know, talk with narcissists as I continue to meet them, because I do talk to a lot of people and they are everywhere. And some of them, it's very rare that they know they're narcissists, but some of them do know that they are. and they will like talk openly about it. So it's interesting. And I've also read some accounts online of people that were narcissists who knew it. There are a few of those online as well. So I find it interesting to continue to learn about something because I would like to um, one day like find a cure for it. Like, I mean, not myself because I'm not a scientist, but I feel like if I put my ideas out there, maybe people that are scientists, could do some brain scans and, find some ways to fix those brains, hopefully, fingers crossed, because narcissists do suffer. They don't have a sense of self. So, like, imagine, well, I don't even have to say imagine, because probably most of you are narcissists. If it really is 95%, like, unless I've somehow only have the 5% watching, what are the odds of that? So, 95% chance you might be. But, I mean, I'm not saying that because who knows? I don't know who you are. You're just some person. Um, anyway, I got off track there, but anyway, I hope that some scientists can watch this and hopefully look for a cure because narcissists are unhappy. They don't have a sense of self. It's like they just feel like an outer shell. There's nothing in there, and it's really hard to be happy and feel good about yourself when there's something inside, when everything is just kind of a fleeting broken shard of glass that's your funhouse mirror. It's not lasting. It's just not like a lasting happiness. Now, I do think that narcissists can do things to improve their lives. They can memorize well and they can stick to stuff when they really see that it can work. But they're always going to have that brain unless we can find a cure, which hopefully we can. So it's not going to solve the problem. It's more of like a band-aid. If they can memorize things like, saying to themselves, how would I feel if someone said that to me? That's something that I found really works well with narcissists. If I switch the situation and I make it about them, it almost always works. I've said that to a lot of narcissists who are like, I don't understand. Why would this person tell me no? And I'm like, well, okay, if you were in this situation, would you blah, blah, blah? And they're like, oh, no, of course not. And then they're like, oh, I get it. Because their brain can't do that on its own because they don't have that empathy and they don't have the self-awareness to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But if you put the situation out there, a lot of the time they will get it, even though they don't have the empathy. They have the selfishness. So if you put it in terms of them, they often can understand. Anyway, hope that was interesting, guys. Just sharing some random thoughts. Again, my name is Julie Malillo. I'm a life coach in Manhattan, and no, I'm not a therapist. I'm a life coach, so narcissism is not something that I deal with like in my coaching. My coaching is about reaching goals faster, and you can go to my website if you have a goal in the present moment that you want to reach in the future faster. Unlike therapy that deals with the past and past hurts, we deal with the present to achieve the goals faster. I ask you questions. We deal with reality. And yeah, that's basically it. So yourdreamslifecoach.com if you want rates for that. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys.